But Hugo's done a great job, and I wanted to go through why invest in probates and why this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Wanted to talk about mindset, the process, a little bit about terminology, and probate investing simplified. So the biggest pain points for investors are that they have a lack of consistent leads. But with probate, you never have to worry about where your next lead is coming from or your next dollar is coming from. Because as Hugo said, you will literally never run out of leads. Now, if you're struggling to get leads, this webinar is definitely for you. As you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so that has changed things up a lot. And there's a backlog now of probates 4 or 5 months, because what happened is some people had filed and this court suddenly closed due to COVID-19. Some of them have not been able to file, but it means that everything came to a screeching halt, and now we have this huge backlog of probates that are just waiting for somebody to buy them. And understand that these are not COVID-19 deaths for the most part. So there'll always be probate leads, but there has never before been a situation like this. So you don't have to worry it's a bad time to buy, because rehabbers are still rehabbing, landlords are still buying, and therefore wholesalers are still there to sell their deals. So you can really do this. But the best part of all is that there is so much less competition, and there are so many people that you get to help. So that's the thing I want you to really understand, is that people really do need your help. So I love probates because they're off-market deals, there's less competition, and these are some of the most motivated sellers on the planet. You will literally never run out of leads. They have a problem and you can solve it. And after all, that's what we're in. We are in the problem-solving business. So what are off-market deals? They're deals that aren't on the MLS. They're often sourced locally. They can be harder to find, which makes them very desirable. And they're leads that you'll be marketing to directly, so there's no agent involved in most cases. And these guys are so motivated because they don't want the house. They've inherited this house, often with a lot of repairs. They just want the cash that's sitting in the house. So you need to understand that you're in the problem-solving business. Once you really understand that, then you won't feel bad working with probates. So if you look at the steps in the probate process, someone passes away. That's what starts everything. And then the probate is filed. So the estate is opened. And when that happens, the people are saying to you, we are ready to move forward with selling the property. As Hugo discussed, there's either a will or there's not a will. So if there's a will, that lays out very clearly who's going to settle the estate. If there's no will, then the judge will determine that. But the assets are sold, the creditors are paid, and the heirs get what is left. And then the estate is closed. So this is the probate process dialed down to its easiest elements. So as we said, once there's a petition for probate, it's going to be decided by the court. If there was no will, who's in charge? And that is the administrator, or that will be appointed. And they are jointly, the executor and the administrator are jointly called the personal representative. So for the third step in the process is that the assets are sold to pay any creditors, and this is often at a deep discount. The creditors are paid, the heirs get what's left, and the estate is closed. So I think we've already gone over all of this. If there's a will, it's testate. If there's no will, that's intestate. So those are just terms that you need to be familiar with. Now, as it was discussed before, there are two types of property: personal property and real property in an estate. Real property is actual physical property, houses, it's land, and it's anything on the property. So that includes the land, the ponds, roads, oil rights, anything that's on the property. Now, personal property is anything that is movable. That's jewelry, cars, stocks and bonds, it's basically anything else. Now, when it comes to notice to creditors, that is something that is done in almost every state. The creditors are notified that someone has passed away. And in every state, the process is a little bit different. So here's an example. You might have to publish a notice in the paper that the person has passed away for 3 weeks in a row. That's one common way that it's done. Sometimes they have 6 months to file a claim or they're out of luck. And if their family is attempting to do the probate themselves, then they're going to know, they need to know that they need to do these things. So going back over the steps, someone dies, there's a petition for probate, there's an executor named in the will, or the court names an administrator. The assets are sold. This is when you can buy the property. When the assets are sold, the creditors are paid, and the heirs get what is left, and the estate is closed. So I get asked this all the time, are there ever problems? Well, not very often, but when there's a problem, it's almost always because the family is trying to settle this estate without an attorney. So you can go to the courthouse, any family can go to the courthouse and get the paperwork to, to take care of this estate, to do all of the steps. But what generally happens is they do one of the steps out of order, or they skip a step, and then you have a problem because it is a legal process and it has to be done in a certain way. But just remember, this is just one more problem. You're in the problem-solving business that just happens to involve property. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about mindset, about your mindset and their mindset. The 4 main reasons that investors don't want to invest in probates are, first of all, they don't understand the process themselves. They're confused. They don't want to learn it, so they just don't dive into probates at all. They don't know how to find the leads. As you know, they can be very difficult to find if you don't happen to be in Chicago and have ChicagoDealVault. Some people have to get them out of the newspaper. Some people have to go to the courthouse, and other people resort to buying what we've already learned are very, very expensive leads. But one of the big things that holds people up is they don't know how to market to these folks. They don't know how to contact them, what to say. They don't have the mail pieces and all of these sorts of things. But the biggest thing by far is their mindset. They just can't get past the fact that they think it's creepy, or that that they're doing something wrong, that they're making money off of someone else's bad luck, off of someone that has passed away. The other thing is they're afraid to talk to sellers about death. I want you to understand that this is just a conversation. It's just like any other conversation that you have with a seller. These people, because this property has landed in probate and they have to sell the property, they are anxious for you to contact them. They are waiting for someone to help them with this property, especially if it's not a property that they're going to be able to list on the MLS. And investors in general, they don't understand this, that while it's a sad time for the family, they have to take care of the business of settling the estate. So in the course of taking care of this estate, of settling this estate, in almost every case, they have to sell the property. But I would encourage you just to focus on how many people you get to help. And that if you take the time to learn this process, you can make a lot of money in the niche of probates. You truly can. It has always been my #1 source of leads. So in talking to mindset, let's talk about the mindset of the sellers. These folks are very often super motivated sellers because they've been through this event where someone has passed away. They've got their life, they've got their job, they've got their kids, whatever the things are that they have to do in their life. And this is thrust upon them. They're confused about the probate process themselves. If the house is if it's a distressed property, they can't afford to do the repairs very often, or even if they could afford it, they don't want to put their money into the property. So they're very anxious, very motivated sellers. And people worry all the time about their competition, when in reality, your competition is lazy. Most of your competition, or your so-called competition, they're not going to stick with this process. They might send out a mailing or two, and then they're just going to quit. Now, as far as the heirs go and the family, and why do they put off selling the property? Because as you've learned, there is a delay in between the time someone passes away and in the time where they sell the property. Now, this might be months, it might be a year, but there are some common reasons why they do this. And number one is, as I said, they've got their own life. They're busy. They've got all these things they have to do, and then they are overwhelmed by the whole probate process. They're overwhelmed and upset, understandably, about the person who passed away. So they have to get themselves in the right mindset to sell the property. Now, this might take months, or it could take up to a year. Another reason they put off dealing with it is the house needs a lot of repairs and updates. This is a big one, as I said. They either don't have the money to do it, or they don't want to put their money into it, or they don't have the skills to do it themselves. So they just put it aside and go on and do what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, and time passes. But there's also a lot of guilt with these people. You have to get rid of someone's prized possessions. Now, a perfect example of this is when my mom passed away. She had this sofa, that her couch, that she really loved. It was something that she put a lot of thought into. She loved it for probably 20 years. But at the end of the day, it had no monetary value. So people put off doing the estate because they don't want to have to deal with the possessions of the person that has passed away. I apologize, I've got terrible allergies. But the number one reason they haven't sold, and this is something that you can use to your advantage, you can use it to give you an edge, and that is there's so much stuff in the house. They cannot face having to clean out all of this stuff. So what I've found over more than a decade of working with probates is that they go over there a few times and they look for valuables. They look for money or jewelry. They look for mementos that they want. So they take things that are important to them or that have sentimental value. And then they look around, and oftentimes the properties will look like this because some older folks, even if they're not hoarders, they can be what I call keepers. They keep everything. They keep old magazines, they keep butter tubs, they keep everything. So they just close the door and they walk out, and they go home with the intention of going back tomorrow or next week or whenever. So this is the number one thing that holds them back. So you solve that by offering, every time you write a contract, you offer to help them or to clean out the house for them. You just figure that in your offer. And the way you do that is you look at the house and see how much stuff is in the house. And then if there's a lot of stuff in the house, you might say, well, okay, that's a 2 dumpster house. Or if there's a little bit of stuff, that's going to take a dumpster, and 4 guys, 8 hours. And then you just figure how much that's going to cost. It's been my experience that it costs somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500 to clean out the typical house that has a lot of stuff in it. But like I said, you use this to your advantage. So when you write your offer, you know, your offer is not only about money. Your offer is about whatever other pain they're suffering, whatever other thing that's holding them back. It could be back taxes. It could be a lot of things. But if it's this, you just write this into every offer, that you will clean out the house for them if that's something that they would like you to do. So it comes back to this again. We're always coming back to the same thing. You're real estate investors, and then we're problem solvers. So your job and what will give you the edge in the probate market, this is one of the things that will give you the edge, is finding out what's holding the seller back. And sometimes all you have to do is just ask them, what else do you need in addition to this offer? What else do you need in addition to me cleaning out the house for you? What else do you need? Just ask them, and they will very often tell you what that is. But in my mind, the number one reason you should choose probate is because you'll never run out of leads. Sadly, that's the case. That is the cycle of life. There will never come a time, putting COVID-19 or any other pandemic or anything aside, where you will have a shortage of probate leads. They will always be consistent leads that can fuel your business. But this particular time in history is a once in a lifetime opportunity because of this pent up inventory. With this information, if you learn the process, you've got this system, this awesome system, ChicagoDealVault, that we would all give an arm and a leg to have in the other cities. You can literally fill your pipeline with business for years to come. Now, what types of houses are you going to find in probate? Well, there's three types generally, almost always. So there are nice houses, and the majority of those will be listed on the MLS. Now, there are a lot of investors that work the MLS. I know a lot of investors in Chicago that work the MLS. So you can still find some deals even if they're listed on the MLS, but by far, you'll get your better deals on the off-market deals. Now, there are the ones that I call the dogs. They're the ones that need a ton of repairs or upgrades, and they are 100% investor deals. These are the houses that are going to be your bread and butter. Now, the third category of houses, they're what I call the maybes, or the middle of the road. Now, probates are not affected by market conditions ever because people pass away. But it's this third category of house, the ones I call the maybes, that will be somewhat affected. And the only way they're affected, though, is that if they're nicer houses in a seller's market, they will be listed on the MLS. In a buyer's market, you can buy really nice houses as wholesale deals out of this group. But just know that pandemic, no pandemic, market conditions, probates will be unaffected because there will always be a steady stream of probate leads. Now, what do the legal aspects of probate have on your business? I know this scares a lot of people off. They're worried that they're going to have to know a bunch of legal stuff, and that could not be further from the truth. In reality, it has absolutely no effect on your business. Now, you need to understand the legal aspects of probate, and the reason is because you can have a conversation with the seller, an intelligent conversation with the seller, without some understanding of the terminology, of the process, and all of those things. But at the end of the day, your closing attorney, or sometimes a probate attorney, they're going to discover any problems when you send them over the contract to buy the property. So you don't have to worry about that. But these things, oftentimes you'll hear some people say, you don't need to know any of this, and I respectfully disagree. Because you need to be able to show up as the expert every time. When you show up, you know the process, you know the lingo, you know how to talk to these people, you understand their mindset, then you become the expert in their minds, even if you're brand spanking new at probates. So understand that with rare exceptions, the house must be sold if it's in the probate. So you buy the house before the estate is closed. And that's a misconception that a lot of people have, that you have to wait until the estate is closed to buy the property, when actually it's the opposite. remember the part in there where the assets are sold. That's when you buy the property, because when the estate is closed, it's all over and done. Now, I just want to touch a little bit on the terminology of probate. And you need to understand that this is a legal process of administering a will, and these matters are taken care of by the probate court. So if there is no will, the judge will appoint an administrator. They have all of the rights and responsibilities as an executor that was named in the will. Don't think we need to go over this again. We've gone over this this whole thing, testate, intestate. You need to be familiar with those terms, and then you need to be clear on what's personal property and what is real property, like real estate. These people, the executor and the administrator, are jointly referred to as the personal representative, and they have the same duties and legal responsibilities. Now, know that if you are appointed an executor of someone's estate, you can't let the family come in there and just take what they want. That's not how it works. You are responsible for seeing that those things, that they don't happen, that any money that comes into the estate is properly handled, so that eventually the other steps can be taken with regards to this. So the decedent is obviously the person that has died. We talked about the estate encompasses everything in there, and the heir is the person who will inherit the property, both with or without the will. So there are laws that determine how this works in all the different states. We talked about this. You can buy the house when the assets are sold. So when the assets are sold, this is the million-dollar question. This is when you can buy the house. You can buy any property that happens to be in the estate. Now, one thing that I did wrong in the beginning, and I would caution you not to do this, is don't assume that there's only one property in the estate. You should have a question on your form that you use to talk to sellers that says, is there any other property in the estate? Because sometimes they'll volunteer the information and sometimes they won't. Sometimes you have to ask for the information. So let's summarize the steps. Someone dies, there's a petition for probate, there's the executor is named or the administrator is appointed, the assets are sold, the creditors are paid, the heirs get what's left, and the estate is closed. That is, again, in its simplest form, how probate works. So I wanted to touch on something just a little bit, and that, let me go back one slide, and that is the creditors. So who are the creditors? Well, the creditors are anyone that is owed money to. It might be that there is a mortgage on the house that, like Hugo said, most of the time you'll find that the properties do not have a mortgage, but sometimes there's a home equity line of credit. They may have a car payment. Sometimes the deceased has a car payment. They may have credit card bills. They may have other types of bills so the creditors are anyone that money is owed to. Now, it would certainly include hospital bills, attorney bills, and it would include things like funeral expenses. So all of those people are creditors, and the creditors get paid. Once the assets are sold, the creditors get paid and the heirs get what's left. So can you see where the heirs would be very anxious to sell the property? They're at the very bottom of the list here. So they're not going to get what they're inheriting until all of these other things are done. Now, when working with probate leads, there are only 4 pieces of information that you need to work in the niche of probates: the name and address of the deceased and the name and address of the executor or the administrator. This is all you need. You don't need case numbers. You don't need date of death, doesn't matter, because as we said, when they open the estate, that is a sign that they are ready to move forward with selling the property. So this is the information, the only 4 pieces that you must have to work in the niche of probates. Now, there are over 3,300 counties in the U.S., and in my area, some of the information is available online. It is in the newspaper. In some counties, it's readily available online. I know lots of people that have to go to the courthouse. New Jersey is a state where a lot of people have to go to the courthouse simply because it's not online. There's no way for people like Hugo to pull this information. Purchase leads is expensive, and it's often unreliable. We'll just let it go there. But since you have Chicago Deal Vault, you don't have that problem. Like I said, the rest of us are so envious that you have a source for getting leads this easily. You really don't know what a valuable resource that is. So once you get your leads, what do you do with your leads? Well, you're going to treat this deal like any other deal. You're going to find a house and put it under contract. You're going to send the A to B contract over to the closing company, and this is where you are buying the property, where you put the property under contract. Now, if you're wholesaling, your next step is you're going to find a buyer, and then you're going to write another contract, the B2C contract, where you are selling the property. So you have 2 contracts. You have the A to B contract where you buy the house, and the B2C contract where you're going to sell the house. And it doesn't really matter if you're selling it to a rehabber, a landlord, or whoever it is. Now, in my situation, what I have always done is I double close. I like to have a nice, clean closing. I do not like assignments because the seller gets to see how much money you're making on the property. And that's just all kinds of issues come up when that happens. So if this is what is different with probates. Normally what I would do in a normal transaction is I would put the house under contract and then go right ahead and sell it to my end buyer and give the closing company both contracts at the same time. That's what I would normally do in a normal closing. But I don't do that with probates, and here's why. Because remember when I said your attorney is going to find any problems that come up in the probate process. If there's anything that needs to be taken care of, they're going to find it. You don't have to be worried about that. One time I had a closing that took 5 months because the family attempted to do the probate themselves. They did it all wrong. Everything was out of order. We kept starting over, kept having to put the house back under contract. And that was when I learned that I should send the contract over to my closing attorney. And I should put some language into my contract that would leave that open-ended so that another investor couldn't come in there in between my contract going dead and the next contract. They couldn't come in there and offer the seller $500 more and get the lead. So put into your contract that closing will be on or before, so like the 30 days upon court/attorney approval. What happens then is that you leave that open. You leave that, you have a contract where someone can't come in there and take your contract. So where you would normally put, what I would normally write in my contract is closing would be no sooner than 7 days, no longer than 30 days. But then I add the language that says upon court/attorney approval to close. So that protects you and your contract. Now I find my best buyers at my local RIA. How many do you need? You only need 4, 5, 6 buyers, really good buyers. You don't need a whole bunch of buyers, but you need really serious rehabbers, serious landlords, And that's all you need, 4 to 6 buyers. You don't need 20, you don't need 50 or 100. So let's talk real quick about marketing. You're going to build a list, which is easy with ChicagoDealVault. You can learn how to do that very simply, very quickly. I do go back, advise people to go back 6 months when they're first starting because of the time difference with probates. I only do direct mail to my people, and I send a letter every month. And I send the letter every month until I buy the house, someone else buys the house, or they come off my list for some reason. There's not really any scenario where I would stop mailing to them so long as the property is available. You want to scrub your list every 4 to 6 months for houses that are sold. Now, I wish there was an easy button for this one, and Hugo probably has a way to do that in ChicagoDealVault. But in most scenarios, we simply have to go online to the tax assessor site, and we have to do this manually. So you don't want to keep mailing and spending your money mailing to people for houses that have already been sold on the MLS. Direct mail tips. Now, this is why I've been doing direct mail in 2 businesses for 30 years now. And one thing I know for sure is that it's not good enough to mail every 6 weeks or 8 weeks. It's not good enough to mail some people some months. You have to mail everyone every month. 81% of your deals will come at or beyond your 5th mailing, but 90% of your competition will stop mailing on or before the 3rd mailing. Those are our national statistics. So if you just stay in the game, you send your mail out, and you just go the process, just stay with the process, you will find success in this business. I start mailing to probates as soon as I put them in my list as soon as the probate's opened. Because, as I said before, once they open that probate, they're raising their hand saying, I'm ready to sell the property. And as I said, I mail to these folks until I buy the house, someone else buys the house, or they come off my list for some reason. Now, if Hugo has a lot of resources in here, but if you want to get a sample probate letter that I use, you can go over to my blog, the Louisville Gals Real Estate blog.com, or you can go to probateinvestingsimplified.com. And if you scroll down to the bottom of that page, there'll be a pop-up where you just put in your email address, and it'll send you a copy of the letter if you want to get a copy of the letter that I use. I want to talk about marketing just real quickly about the big picture of marketing and talk about branding. So I want you to understand that marketing and branding are kind of like a couple. So marketing is how you get deals. Marketing is how you get leads in the door. But branding is why they choose you. It's why they choose to work with you over the next person or all of your perceived competition. So it's very important that you do both of these things at the same time. Now, the sellers have a new way of choosing who they want to work with. The old way was that they would hear about you through a mail piece or an ad or word of mouth, but somehow they would hear about you. And then they would pick up the phone and give you a call. And if they liked you, they would just simply say, okay, I'm going to work with Hugo. But today it's a much different process. They may even begin their search online and start kind of sorting through people before they ever get a mail piece. But the next thing they're going to do, whether they went online or they got your direct mail piece or some other method you contacted them, they're going to check you out online. They're going to Google you. They're going to look for a website. They're going to look for a social media presence. And based on what they find online, they're going to start to create their own short list. They're going to decide based on what they find in your branding, who they want to work with. And that is an absolute fact. So that could be something as simple as having, well, you certainly should have a website. I'm just going to say that you should have a website. Everybody should have a lead generation website. But you can have a Facebook page and just post on there, you know, I'm looking for deals, or here I looked at this house, or post a picture of a house that you put under contract. That'll begin to build a social media presence. If you're comfortable with video, do walkthroughs of vacant houses and post those on YouTube. That will also come up when they search for you. There are many, many ways to create an online presence without getting all fancy. Now, I just happen to be a blogger and a podcaster, but I was not either one of those things when I first started out in real estate. And I will say this to you, it's not so much who you know as who knows you. Who knows about you if they have a deal that maybe they found a house and they don't have a way to close on it, and you have access to private money or to hard money. So you want to be the person that they think of, and one of the best ways to get known in the real estate world is to attend your RIA meetings, which we all know you can't do now in person. But when things open up, you should make networking a #1 priority, because that's another huge way that you get known in the real estate world. Now, we've covered a lot of information, and I've tried to really go through this fast because, once again, my apologies for my tech problems. I really don't have an answer for that. But I would encourage you, and I'd like to close with this. Look down the road 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, or more from now, and imagine what you would like your business to look like. Imagine what it'll look like if you're still struggling to get leads in the door, if you don't add probates to your business. Will you still be struggling to find a consistent source of leads? Well, the answer is yes, and I can tell you how I know that answer, because that was me. Before I discovered probates, I was doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but I never could create that consistent deal flow, because I couldn't create a source of leads that was evergreen, so to speak, that was going to be the same month after month after month. So when you think about your business, think about if you're going to make some changes now, what you're going to do, and if you don't make these changes, what your business is going to look like down the road, 1 year from now, 2 years from now. So if you want to find out more, you can go over, like I said, I have a ton of free information on the blog, the Louisville Gals Real Estate blog. And you can also check out Probate Investing Simplified. So I hope this has been helpful to you. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But I think I'm just going to try to wrap it up here, if that's okay with you, Hugo.
Yeah, absolutely, Sharon. Absolutely. Yes.
So this is a big topic, and I know you did a great job of covering your software and how awesome that is. Were there any questions for me that I could answer for you?
Ron is asking if you have a sample of the closing contract that you use.
You mean of a sales and purchase contract,
Yeah,
or
exactly. Sales contract.
sales and purchase contract? Yes, I do. And they can, we use a one-page contract in our area that was drawn up by our attorney. I would say always just run it by the people in your state. But yes, you can, I get that. You can send me an email and I'll send you one that we use, and then you can run that by your people in your state, since I'm in Kentucky and you're in Illinois. But yeah,
Okay.
you can email me. Hugo, it'd probably be simpler for you to to give them my email address than for me to try to say it.
Yeah, of course, of course, of course. That's not a problem. So we'll make that available. And then I mentioned earlier that you do have a more in-depth training on probate should they decide to do this professionally.
Hmm. I do. I have a 6-week course. I've got it's a very in-depth training called it's probateinvestingsimplified.com. So it's a 6-week course. It's dripped down so that you learn each piece and don't jump ahead to doing direct mail and waste a lot of money. But I have a lot of bonuses in there, and one of them is a direct mail training. There, you can waste a lot of money on direct mail if you don't do it correctly. So what I teach in there is the basics of direct mail marketing, and you can use that for any niche. It's not just for probate, whether it's absentee owners or code violations. You can use the same principles for every real estate niche. I also talk about outsourcing in there. We have a lot of tools, tips, and technology type of things. So it's a very comprehensive program. But if you go over to the page, probateinvestingsimplified.com, it will tell you everything that's included in the course.